All right, good afternoon. This is a review of Chapter 5. So what I want you to do is hit pause and solve these problems, and then I will do them, and you can check for understanding and see if you got the right answer. So go ahead and hit pause and solve both of these by estimating to the roundest, or estimate by rounding to the nearest whole number. So go ahead and do that. All right, so we have, if we're going to round 2 and 9/10, that's going to round to a 3, because again, we're looking at the denominator and taking half of it. So if it was half of the denominator, which is 5, so 5 or more for the numerator would give me the next number of a 3, divided by 1 and 1/8. And the 1/8, again, half of the denominator is 4. So 4 or more would round up, otherwise it stays the same, so it stays at 1. And 3 divided by 1 is 3. Now looking at letter B, again, half of 9 is 4.5, so it's less than that, so it's going to round to a 6, minus 5 and 1/7. The 7, again, if I had a 3.5 or more, that would then round up. It is less, therefore it is 5, and 6 minus 5 is 1. Alrighty, let's look at our next one. This is simply adding or subtracting for the next 4 problems. And so go ahead and do that. Remember, common denominators are what you need to have. So go ahead and hit pause and solve. So again, I'm going to set this up. I like to write them vertically so that I can do all of my work off to the side. And common denominators, I start with the largest denominator. If the other one goes into it, then that is your least common denominator. So it is 9/14, and 14 is going to be what our, again, least common denominator is. I said that incorrectly. So we're going to multiply by 2. 7 times 2 is the 14. So 3 times 2 is 6. Now I can add. 6 plus 9 is 15 over 14. And I simplify by simply taking 14 into 15 one whole time. And what's remaining is 1 over my 14. Again, you can simply divide to get that same answer of 1 and 1/14. Let's look at our next one. Go ahead and solve this. Now again, since we already have common denominators, then we can just simply add our numerators together, which would be 11 over the 15, and then simply add my whole numbers, which 3 plus 6 is 9. And 11/15, make sure that's in simplest form, and it is, so therefore that's my answer. Now go ahead and solve letter E. So we're going to take 7 and 3/5 and 5 and 1/3. Again, finding our least common denominator, we start with the largest denominator. Does 3 go into 5 equally? No, it doesn't. So the next multiple of 5 is 10. Does 3 go into 10 equally? No. So next multiple is 15. And yes, 3 goes into 15 equally. So 15 is my least common denominator times 3. So 3 times 3 is 9. 3 times 5 gives me 15.
Danielle Smith, please report to the office. Danielle Smith.
Sorry about that. So 1 times 5 is 5. And now I can subtract. And now we have to make certain that if we look at our numerator on top, has to be larger than the bottom numerator, which it is. So therefore we can subtract, and we get 4/15. And 7 minus 5 is 2. Check again and make certain that this is in simplest form, and it is. So 2 and 4/15. Now go ahead and hit pause and solve this. So I have 4 and 3/10 minus 2 and 4/5. We're going to subtract again. look at my largest denominator, and 5 goes into that equally. So yes, 3/10 is going to stay the same. And this is going to become a 10. So 5 times what is 10? Times 2. So 4 times 2 is 8. Now we're going to try to subtract, and you see that we cannot subtract 3 minus 8. That would look like this, which we cannot do. We'd get a negative 5. So we're going to borrow 1 whole from our from the 4, which makes it a 3. And then we're going to add on to this what would equal 1 whole, which would be any number over itself. We are going to choose 10 because that gives us common denominators. We are adding these two fractions together to get 13/10. We're not changing it to 10/10. We're adding them together to what's already there. Okay, so now we're simply take 13 minus 8, which is going to give me 5 over the 10, and then subtract 3 minus 2 to give me 1, and that then simplifies by dividing it by 5 to give me 1 1/2. That is my final answer. Now let's multiply. Go ahead and let you hit pause and solve this. Well, again, when we multiply, we have to make them into fractions, whether they're proper or improper. So improper fractions is what we'll make our mixed numbers into. So 2 times 4 is 8 plus 1, so I get 9 over 2, times 12 times 2 is 24, plus 1 more is 25 over 12. Now I look to see if I can cross reduce. I can cross reduce here by dividing by 3, which is going to make this 4. Divide this by 3, which is going to become 3. So now I can say 3 times 25 is 75 over 2 times 4 is 8. Now I need to divide that, and I say, well, how many 8s go into 75? Well, 9 times, which would be 72, and 72 from 75 is 3 over the 8 because it stays the same, and we get 9 3/8 for an answer. Let's look at our next problem. This says find the multiplicative inverse. Okay, multiplicative inverse. So to do that, well, I'll let you solve it. So go ahead and hit pause and solve first. Multiplicative inverse is the same thing as finding the reciprocal of a fraction. So let's go ahead and do this, and it's just simply flipping that fraction to get 12/7. Done. Now for this one, letter K, we've got to make it a fraction first. Then you can flip it to get my 1/5. Always be very, very careful on that whole number that you make it a fraction first. Same thing for a mixed number. If I have 5 1/3, I need to make this into 16/3 first before I flip it to 3/16. Lots of different steps that we have to be very careful with. So now go ahead and divide letter H. So I get 2/5 divided by, this is going to be 3 over 1. Leave it a division problem until you have made them both into fractions. Now I get 2/5 stays the same, change it to multiplication, and the reciprocal or multiplicative inverse of 3 1s would be 1/3. Look to see if I can cross reduce, which I cannot, and I get 2/15. Done. Let's look at our next problem. Go ahead and hit pause and solve this. So once again, I need to make them into fractions. So 10 times 4 is 40, plus 3 more is 43/10, divided by 5 times 2 is 10, plus 1 more is 11 over 5. Now I need to write it as 43 over 10 times 5/11. Got to take the reciprocal of that to flip it. Now I can look to see if I can cross reduce, and I can. The 5 is going to become a 1, and this will become a 2 by dividing both of those by 5. And now 43 times 1 is 43, and 11 times 2 is 22. Now I need to divide this, and you can see that how many 22s go into 43, which would be simply just 1. And then you can take your 43 minus your 22, and you're going to get 1, 2, so you have 21 over 22 remaining. Let's look at our next problem. Letter L. So go ahead and solve this. This is solving an equation using that multiplicative inverse. Since this is a division problem with W over 2, meaning W divided by 2, you do the inverse operation, which would be times 2. So you multiply the other side times 2, which is going to equal W by itself, because we can put this over 1, and you can see that we can cross reduce these to make them 1s, and W over 1 is W. Now we have 2 times 8, which is 16, and that is your final answer. Plug this in to your W, and isn't 16 divided by 2 equal to 8? Yes. And the last problem, go ahead and solve this. So again, multiplicative inverse, you can say, well, first of all, this is a multiplication problem, okay? And if you are going to divide, as we've learned already, do the inverse, divide by 4/5, we would have to flip the fraction. So we do, again, the reciprocal. So we're going to multiply both sides by its inverse. 4/5 turns into 5/4 because these will cross reduce and become 1s, to where 1 times b is b. And so we're going to take 12 times 5/4. We're going to make this over 1. Can we cross reduce? Yes, by dividing by 4. So that becomes a 1. This becomes a 3. And we get 15 over 1, which equals 15. So again, and if you want to double check this, you certainly can by taking 4/5 times 15, which would be over 1, cross reduce, and you get 12 over 1, which equals 12, and that's what we started with. Okay, so B equals 15. Again, if you're having questions, please certainly bring these up in class tomorrow. I'm happy to help you on these further. You also have an opportunity to go to My Big Campus, and you can click on that link where it says take the practice test, and feel free to take that as many times as you wish. And there's some really nice guided lessons on there as well, especially if you get them incorrect. It'll help show you how to do those correctly. And if you're are still unsure, again, please ask within the next week before we take our test. So have a great day and good luck on your test.